So I'm making a rhythm game, and someone who's making a rhythm game spends an awful lot of time thinking about what exactly they should be trying to emphasize, what exactly they're doing with their rhythm game. What is the game about? And I think this person, who's the world's fastest violinist, at least as of when the video was made, is an interesting example of what I think rhythm games are about. So, this person is being laughed at in this video because he's really good at hitting all of the notes in Flight of the Bumblebee, but the notes don't sound good at all when he hits them, and, well, actually, he probably hits some of the wrong notes as well. But in a rhythm game, you can separate the concept of the notes from the music a little bit, and the player can just experience, hitting the notes. So I think of rhythm games as completely being about the skill of hitting notes in a song, which is what this violinist is focusing on. He's focusing on the skill of hitting the notes, which is out of place in music, but it's perfectly at home in rhythm games. So I'd like to go through a few rhythm games that I've played and that are popular, and talk about how I think they both hit and miss sort of what I think of as the essential meaning and purpose of rhythm games. What about them is interesting to me. So this game is A Dance of Fire and Ice. It is a one-track rhythm game. And I say one track, not one key rhythm game, because you can you can bind more than one key on your keyboard to the single action that you can take in this game. So it's one track in that there's like a single action that you can take, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one key. And in general, I think rhythm games should be control method agnostic, and this game is. What this game does is it uses the physical concept of two orbs rotating in space at a set distance to constrain the visual presentation of the game. I look at visuals in rhythm games as a way to get the user the knowledge they need. It's a way to provide the user information about the notes that they're expected to hit and when they're supposed to hit them. I think this method of displaying that information is interesting, and it's probably more visually interesting than what the vertical scrolling rhythm game equivalent would be, especially in a single track game. It would literally just be, a line in space and notes, just single notes coming in across that line. But at the same time, I think the primary metric for determining whether visuals in a rhythm game are good should be, does it convey the information to the user? Is it easy to parse? And I don't know objectively whether this is easier to parse than the vertical scrolling rhythm game equivalent. It's kind of hard for me to say, because it is a little bit interesting in that it gives you a lot more space to show the rhythm and the notes to the user. But at the same time, it could be that choosing this method brings with it a bunch of limitations to what you can do, to what notes the player can hit. And so I think it's debatable whether the choice of these visuals was actually a good choice, or more of a distraction than anything. So this is Guitar Hero 3. It is a 5-track rhythm game. It has normal notes, which are activated by both holding a fret and activating the clicker, the strum bar, at the same time. But there's also notes that are called hammer-ons, where you don't have to activate the strum bar before you hit them, as long as you're in a combo. So you can't just start a hammer-on. You have to first hit a note with the strum, and then you can hit hammer-on notes after that. And then there's also held notes. And I think all of those actions that the user can do, I think of those as very legitimate. But there's also the ability to activate star power, which has a button devoted to that on the controller, or you could lift up the guitar controller in order to activate that. And what that does is it doubles the score that you earn for the notes in the song. And because score is the game's metric of how good you're doing, it means that star power has to become a skill that the player practices. They have to spend time thinking about when is the best place in the song to activate star power. And like, it's certain that there's going to be one optimal sequence of activations over and above the player already hitting all the notes perfectly. And I think that adding that aspect to the rhythm game, it can make it like a little bit more quote unquote fun, I guess. But realistically, you're focusing on something that to me isn't the essence of rhythm games. You're not focusing on the skill of hitting notes in a song. You're choosing when to activate this thing that arbitrarily decides, oh, these notes are worth twice as much, without actually changing what notes you're hitting. Why should notes be worth a different depending on some resource that you're choosing to expend? That's, to me, not pure rhythm gaming. It's a mixture of some other kind of game. And there's nothing wrong with people making other kinds of games than what I think of as a pure rhythm game. But to me, it's like a less legitimate function. And then this game also has combo scoring, which goes in line with what I mentioned earlier. I don't think it makes sense to arbitrarily award up to 4 times as many points when you're not activating star power for notes just based on how many notes you had hit before it. That doesn't seem like a relevant factor in deciding how many points to award. And also, combo scoring causes there to be a lot of variation in scores for players that like say a player has a constant skill and they play the song a bunch of times, they're going to sort of randomly miss a few notes at various places in the song, and as a result of the combo scoring, their final scores are going to vary a lot. Whereas if you took out the combo scoring, you would see very little variation in the score. So I think combo scoring just makes score a worse measure of skill. Another thing that happens in Guitar Hero is that there's all or nothing accuracy. So either you hit the note and you get the maximum possible points for hitting the note, or you don't hit the note, and therefore your combo gets broken, and you don't get to earn star power for whatever sequence of notes was about to award you star power. And it's kind of okay, but it could be more precise. It could be, if you had instead a way to award more points based on how accurately you hit the note, then you would make the player focus on how accurately they're hitting the note. That would become the focus of the game, and I think that is a legitimate focus. I think that is part of, conceptually, the skill of hitting notes in a song. There's also the fact that in Guitar Hero, it's like a console game, so you have to either use the guitar controller, or you can use a controller, at least in Guitar Hero 3, and I think the prior games. In later games, you couldn't actually use a regular controller. And I don't think that guitar controller is necessarily the best input method for this kind of thing. I think it's pretty good. Well, the guitar controller. A regular controller, maybe not, actually. In my experience, I could be wrong about that. But the input method being restricted is not ideal in my view. Like I said before, I think rhythm games should be input method agnostic, and it kind of detracts a little bit from the game. because of that, it sort of limits its potential, along with the other things that I talked about. Uh, it limits its potential interest to me. Uh, and although I think the guitar controller is pretty good, I think there could exist some other control method that's even better. So the last game I'm going to talk about is Friday Night Funkin', and I'm going to be a little bit more critical of this game than maybe I otherwise would, just because of how popular it is. I think it's really interesting and actually a little bit confusing to me how it became so popular, and maybe talking about why I don't like it will cement in people's mind that my opinion doesn't have to matter. You can instead just go with the popular opinion as your metric, and that's totally fine. But so, anyways, Friday Night Funkin' is a 4-track rhythm game. It has two kinds of notes, normal notes and held notes. It does have accuracy discrimination, so you can hit notes better or worse. You could hit them perfectly, or you can hit them kind of okay, and it still contributes to your combo, and they're still counted as being hit. Although I don't know technically whether the level of accuracy counts towards the score. Honestly, I never really looked into it at that depth, because I guess I just didn't play songs repeatedly that much when I was playing it. When the game first came out, and even a few updates after that, there weren't any key binding options in the game, so you had to use WASD. And there also wasn't an option to flip the scroll direction from where it is now in the picture, upscroll, to change it to downscroll. And I think the lack of those features in the initial release is sort of telling, because to me, key binding options and upscroll versus downscroll options are essential to any rhythm game. If you don't have those features, it's a non-starter to me, because I can't really play upscroll for one thing, and I feel like the rhythm game community is kind of split. You have the people who first started playing rhythm games with games like Guitar Hero, which is downscroll, and then you have other people whose first introduction to rhythm games was games like Dance Dance Revolution, which is upscroll. And so it feels to me, I'm not sure whether this is borne out in the statistics, but it feels to me that there's like a 50-50 split on the preference for upscroll versus downscroll. And for a downscroll player to try to play upscroll, it's like you're playing half as good or less compared to how good you could be playing. It just feels awful as a result of that. And I think it's tied to the concept of being control method agnostic, or it's more like, I think that the visuals should serve to give information about the notes to the player, and that's all it should be about. It shouldn't matter whether it's upscroll or downscroll. I don't think that that's an interesting choice to make for your game, to say like, oh, this is an upscroll rhythm game. I would ask, like, why? Why is that? If you're going to make an upscroll rhythm game, then what exactly can you do with it being upscroll that you couldn't do with it being downscroll, is the question I would ask. And I think with certainly Friday Night Funkin' and other rhythm games, the answer is nothing. It makes no difference whether it's upscroll or downscroll. So just add in the feature so that you can get 50% of the people back into being able to play the game. Or what I did in order to first be able to play this game is I would put it into OBS and flip the output so that I could just look at the OBS output, which was flipped, in order to actually play the game. And then I would use some other method to rebind my keys so that I could have my own custom key bindings. It was just kind of a pain in the butt, and it's really strange to me that that wasn't like top of the list of things to do. But To be fair, it now has key bindings, and it now has a downscroll option. Okay. So then, I want to bring up some other things that I think sort of detract from the purity of the experience. The scroll speed changes based on the BPM of the song that you're playing. So songs that have a faster rhythm will have the notes scroll faster, and those with a slower rhythm have the notes scroll slower. And this is a very difficult concept to explain to people who don't play rhythm games. It's completely separate from the number of notes on the screen. Okay, you could have hitting one note per second with a fast scroll speed, or you could have hitting one note per second with a slow scroll speed. Scroll speed is a completely separate concept from how many notes you're having to hit how quickly. It really just boils down to how much reaction time you have before the note goes from based on this picture, the bottom of the screen to where you're expected to be able to hit it. And I don't think that reaction time should be in the control of the game. I don't think at some point in the game it's a slow reaction speed, and another point in the game it's a fast reaction speed. I don't look at reaction speed as an interesting element. I don't think of that as part of the skill of hitting notes in a song. I think you're just making a worse UI. Why would you make your visuals harder to parse deliberately for the user? I view that as a distraction from what the focus should be, which is let the user get the information in whatever way is best for them so that they can display their skill as best they can. Display their ability to hit notes in rhythm with a song, whatever the notes are, as fast as possible, as accurately as possible. And then another thing which is central to the game, and I think really indicates that the game is trying to be story focused, like that's its niche, that's its thing that it's trying to bring to rhythm gaming, because it's about the story of the kid who's going on a series of rap battles. But you have these breaks in the song where the opponent on the left side of the screen is hitting notes and you're not hitting notes. You just have to sort of sit there and wait. And I found two things. One thing is, why should there be a part of the game where I'm literally not doing anything? That doesn't help me. And another thing, these sections actually do the opposite. They do worse than not help me. In fact, they're distracting to me, because for a second, I think, ooh, like, this is interesting. I'm sort of caught up in the narrative of, like, what are these interesting next notes? What is this next phrase of the song that I'm going to have to play? How hard is it? Should I be worried? Should I feel like I'm doing well? Things like that. I have the opportunity to think about that while I'm staring at the other side of the screen. And then all of a sudden, notes start to come up on my side of the screen. And I sort of have to, like, snap back into focus mode. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm still playing a game. Let me try to hit these notes. And inevitably, I get distracted by the visuals and I, like, miss a couple notes. And then there's some parts of the song, or some songs, I should say, where they break that pattern and you have only, like, half of the phrase where you're doing nothing and just watching the other person hit notes. Or it's like a duet phrase and both you and the opponent are hitting notes at the same time. And you can't predict what kind of phrase it's going to be unless you've played the song before. And even then, I don't tend to memorize that aspect of the song typically. At least not it takes me like a few plays to actually internalize that. Oh yeah, this is the first phrase where I break for like the whole thing, and then the second time that happens, I break for like half of it, and then the last one is a duet. So like, don't get distracted in that part. Like, why are we adding these distractions? Why does that have to be such an integral part of the game when it's not about the skill of hitting notes in a song? So, yeah, as you can tell, like, I'm a little bit frustrated and a little bit confused by how popular Friday Night Funkin' is. But at the same time, it just says that the story element in it and the visuals and whatever else that they're doing that I can't really articulate, all that stuff is doing really well. And so they deserve praise for that. And so fantastic. I'm not trying to root for the destruction of Friday Night Funkin', but I think it's just an indicator of how you can have a radically different philosophy than me in making a rhythm game. And I think that that's interesting.